There's something unsettling about Craigslist, a place where anonymity thrives, where the hidden corners of the internet allow people to trade, buy, and sell with little accountability. It's a space where dark things can easily hide behind the ordinary. A piano for sale, a job offer, a room for rent. This is one such story, drawn from the depths of Craigslist, where a seemingly innocent ad spiraled into something far more sinister. It all began when Sarah, a 23-year-old college student, was looking for a cheap place to live. She'd been scouring Craigslist for weeks, trying to find something within her tight budget. The listings were sparse, and what little she found either came with sketchy landlords or shared living spaces that felt unsafe. Just when she was about to give up, she came across an ad that seemed too good to be true. Room for rent, $300 a month, all utilities included. Female preferred. The pictures attached showed a clean, cozy bedroom with soft lighting and tasteful decor. The house itself was located in a quiet suburban neighborhood which looked perfect for someone like Sarah who needed a peaceful place to study. The price was incredibly low, but she figured maybe it was because the landlord was just trying to find the right tenant quickly. Excited but cautious, Sarah reached out to the ad's poster, a man named Daniel. He responded almost immediately, telling her that he was a professional photographer and lived alone in the house. He sounded friendly in his emails, even mentioning that his last tenant had just moved out after finishing school, which is why the room was suddenly available. They arranged a time for Sarah to come over and see the place. When she arrived, Daniel greeted her at the door. He was tall, lanky, and looked to be in his mid-30s. He had a camera slung around his neck and explained that he had just finished a shoot, apologizing for his casual attire. The house smelled faintly of incense, and though it was a bit dim inside, it had a warm, inviting feel. Daniel showed her around, and everything looked as it had in the pictures, clean, well-kept, and strangely perfect. She was ready to move in. But something tugged at her mind, something small but nagging, the basement. She noticed that Daniel didn't mention it during the tour, and when she asked if she could see it, he hesitated for a second too long before smiling and saying, "Oh, it's just a workspace. Nothing exciting down there." A little red flag waved in the back of her mind, but she brushed it aside. After all, basements weren't usually a part of rental tours, right? She signed the lease. The first few days living there were fine. Daniel kept to himself, and Sarah barely saw him except in passing. She had her own bathroom and plenty of privacy, just like he had promised. Everything seemed perfect, until the night she started hearing noises. It was late, and Sarah was studying for an exam when she first heard it. A soft, rhythmic thudding coming from beneath the floor. It was faint, almost like someone was gently tapping on the basement ceiling. She paused her music and listened, but the sound stopped as soon as she did. Shaking it off as her mind playing tricks, she continued her work. But over the next few nights, the noises grew louder. Thuds, then soft, dragging sounds, almost as if furniture was being moved. The more she listened, the more she realized the sounds seemed deliberate. One night, she couldn't take it anymore. Grabbing a flashlight, she decided to check the basement for herself. As she approached the basement door, she felt a chill crawl up her spine. It was locked. That was odd. Why would Daniel lock the basement if it was just a workspace? Her curiosity got the better of her, so the next morning when Daniel left for work, she searched the house for the key. After some digging around in drawers, she found it, an old brass key, heavy and worn. She waited until that night when Daniel was out again. Heart pounding, she unlocked the basement door and slowly descended the creaky wooden steps. The air grew colder as she went down, and a faint, musty smell filled her nostrils. The basement was dimly lit, with a single bare bulb swinging from the ceiling. At first glance, the room seemed normal. Photography equipment was scattered around, and shelves lined the walls with boxes of film and camera lenses. But then, in the corner, something caught her eye. A small door. It was barely noticeable, hidden behind some old furniture and stacks of cardboard boxes. The door was padlocked. Every instinct told her to turn around, just to leave, but she couldn't. Her fingers trembled as she found a crowbar among Daniel's tools and pried the padlock loose. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow hallway, dimly lit by a single flickering light bulb. The stench hit her first, a rancid metallic odor that made her gag. She almost turned back, but something deeper drove her forward. At the end of the hallway was a room, dark, cold, and lined with shelves. But what was on the shelves made her blood freeze. Photos, hundreds of them, all of women. They were pinned to the walls, neatly arranged, each one staring back at her with hollow, lifeless eyes. Some were smiling, some weren't. But all of them had one thing in common. They had been taken by Daniel. In the corner of the room was a chair, stained with something dark, and next to it, a camera, still turned on, its red recording light blinking. Sarah's heart raced. As she slowly backed away, her foot hit something soft. She looked down and screamed. There, lying on the floor, was a body, a woman's body, partially covered by a sheet, her face contorted in terror. In that moment, Sarah realized that Daniel wasn't just a photographer. He was a hunter, and the basement wasn't just a workspace. It was a lair. She ran, her feet barely touching the steps as she raced up the stairs, her breath coming in shallow gasps. As she reached the top, she heard the front door creak open. Daniel was home. For a second, she froze, the keys in her hand slipping to the floor. He was in the kitchen, humming softly, as if nothing was wrong. She had to think fast. Grabbing her phone, she darted toward her bedroom and locked the door, her heart slamming against her ribcage. She quickly dialed 911, her hands shaking so violently that she almost dropped the phone. From outside her door, she could hear Daniel's footsteps. Slow, deliberate. "Sarah?" he called out, his voice calm and friendly. "Is everything okay?" She couldn't breathe. He knocked softly on her door. "You're not supposed to go down there," he said, his voice taking on a darker, more sinister edge. She heard the sound of sirens in the distance, but Daniel didn't move. He just stood there, his shadow creeping under the crack of the door. "You really shouldn't have gone down there," he whispered, almost sad. The sirens grew louder, and finally she heard the front door burst open. Daniel didn't resist when the police arrived. He just smiled as they handcuffed him, his eyes lingering on Sarah as if she were his next photograph. In the following days, the police uncovered what Daniel had been hiding for years. Dozens of missing women, all lured by his Craigslist ads, each one disappearing without a trace. Sarah was the only one who got away. But even now, she can't escape the memory of his voice or the feeling that somewhere, somehow, Daniel is still watching her, waiting for his next photo. Amy had always prided herself on being practical. When she needed to sell her old furniture before moving to a new apartment, Craigslist seemed like the easiest solution. After all, millions of people used it every day, and she'd successfully bought and sold items on the site before without issue. This time, she was selling her couch, a faded but still comfortable piece that had been with her through 3 different apartments. The ad went live, and she quickly received a message from someone named Michael. His response was polite and to the point. "Interested in the couch. Can come by tomorrow. Cash in hand." The next day, Michael arrived as promised. He was average looking, maybe in his late 30s, with unkempt hair and a bit of stubble. He smiled when Amy opened the door, introducing himself with a firm handshake. He seemed friendly enough, even though something about him felt off. She couldn't put her finger on it, but she chalked it up to nerves. After all, she was letting a complete stranger into her home. "Nice couch," Michael said, giving it a once-over before sitting down, bouncing slightly to test the springs. "Feels good. How much did you say again?" 300, Amy replied, crossing her arms. She just wanted him to take the couch and leave. There was something about his eyes, the way they never quite met hers, that made her uneasy. Michael nodded and stood up. "That works for me." He fumbled in his jacket pocket and pulled out a crumpled stack of bills. As he handed her the cash, his hand brushed hers, lingering for just a moment too long. Amy pulled back quickly, trying to ignore the chill that ran through her. "I'll need to come back with a truck to get it, though," he said, stuffing his hands into his pockets and rocking on his heels. "Tomorrow night, okay? I can swing by around 8. Amy hesitated. She didn't really want him coming back, but what choice did she have? The couch was heavy, and she didn't know how else to get rid of it. "Sure," she said, forcing a smile. "That works." As soon as Michael left, Amy locked the door behind him and leaned against it, a knot forming in her stomach. Something about him unsettled her, but she couldn't pinpoint why. She checked the bills he gave her. Real enough, but something still gnawed at her. She decided to text a friend, Kate, and asked if she could come by the next evening, just in case. Kate agreed, and Amy felt a little better knowing she wouldn't be alone. The next day passed uneventfully, though Amy found herself checking the clock constantly, dreading Michael's return. By the time 8 p.m. rolled around, Kate was already at her apartment, sipping a glass of wine and chatting about work. Amy tried to join in the conversation, but her mind kept wandering back to the stranger. Right on time, there was a knock at the door. Amy's heart skipped a beat. She glanced at Kate, who gave her a reassuring nod. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door. Michael stood there, grinning. Behind him was a battered old pickup truck with a rusty trailer hitched to the back. "Got the truck," he said cheerfully, but his eyes darted past her, noticing Kate sitting on the couch. His smile faltered for just a second. "Didn't know you'd have company." Amy shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Just my friend helping me out, ready to load the couch?" Michael nodded, but something had shifted in his demeanor. He seemed less friendly now, more focused. He moved to the couch and started hauling it toward the door with Amy and Kate's help. As they loaded it into the trailer, Michael spoke up again. "You live here alone, right?" The question caught Amy off guard. "Yeah, why?" Michael smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just curious. It's a nice building." Amy felt a shiver crawl up her spine. Kate must have sensed something too, because she stepped forward, crossing her arms. "Why does that matter?" Michael chuckled, waving a hand dismissively. "No reason, just making conversation." As they finished loading the couch, Amy couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. She forced a smile and thanked Michael for the purchase, eager to get him out of her sight. He climbed into his truck, waved once, and drove off into the night. Amy let out a long breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "That guy was weird, right?" she asked, turning to Kate. "Yeah, super creepy," Kate replied. "Glad I was here. He gave me the chills." Amy tried to brush it off, hoping that would be the end of it. But the following night, as she lay in bed trying to sleep, something jolted her awake. A soft thud outside her window. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She listened intently, straining to hear any other sounds. Then there it was again, another thud, closer this time. It was coming from outside near the alley behind her building. Her apartment was on the second floor, but the fire escape ran right up to her bedroom window. She swallowed hard, trying to convince herself it was just the wind, maybe a stray cat knocking something over. But then she heard it. Soft footsteps on the metal stairs, the unmistakable creak of someone slowly ascending the fire escape. Her blood ran cold. She grabbed her phone and crept silently toward the window, her fingers trembling. She peeked through the blinds just enough to see a figure standing at the base of the fire escape, staring up at her window. It was Michael. He was standing perfectly still, his head tilted slightly as if listening. Amy's heart hammered in her chest, and she ducked down, her mind racing. Why was he here? How did he know where she lived? She hadn't told him her apartment number, and there were dozens of units in her building. Amy fumbled with her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed 911. The dispatcher answered, but before she could speak, she heard a metallic clank, a sound that made her stomach drop. Michael had started climbing the fire escape. She whispered urgently into the phone, giving her address and explaining that someone was trying to break into her apartment. The dispatcher told her to stay on the line, but Amy was too scared to move. She crawled toward her bedroom closet, hiding in the corner as the footsteps grew louder. The metal steps groaned under Michael's weight as he climbed higher. He was almost at her window now. Amy held her breath, listening as the footsteps stopped just outside. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a soft tapping on the glass. "Amy," he whispered, his voice low and almost sing-song. "I know you're in there. I just want to talk." She squeezed her eyes shut, praying the police would arrive soon. Then came the sound of breaking glass. He was inside. Amy's mind went blank with terror. She could hear him moving around her apartment, his footsteps slow and deliberate. "Amy," he called again, his voice echoing through the small space. "I know you're hiding. You shouldn't have brought your friend. I thought it was just going to be us." Tears welled up in her eyes as she clutched her phone, trying not to make a sound. The seconds felt like hours, each one dragging on as she waited for the police. Michael's footsteps grew closer, and she heard him open her bedroom door. He was right there, just feet away from the closet. Suddenly, there was a loud banging at the front door, police officers shouting her name. Michael froze. For a split second, everything was still. Then she heard him bolt. He ran back toward the window, scrambling down the fire escape as the police burst into her apartment. Amy threw open the closet door, sobbing with relief as the officers rushed in. They searched the area, but Michael was gone. For weeks, Amy couldn't sleep. She couldn't shake the feeling that Michael was still out there, watching her, waiting for another chance. The police never caught him. But every now and then, when she's alone at night, she hears a soft tapping on her window and her heart skips a beat. She knows he's still out there, searching for his next target on Craigslist.